The whole idea that I'm operating in, the whole trajectory is making new structures. So we've been in a dualistic world for many centuries. You know, right and wrong and masculine and feminine, and you can't really enjoy your relationship unless you work hard. All of these dualities. And my sense is that the future is about resonance and alignment and including. And we do a lot of work with integrity, which we consider to be wholeness. That, in fact, the definition of integrity that I love is a totality and wholeness with nothing lacking. That's really what integrity is. And it allows you to use your whole self.
Welcome to the Global Affair podcast, brought to you by Love Out Loud, the world's largest love-based movement, actualizing a civilization of love by 2030. My name's Nicole Gibson, and join me and some of the world's brightest minds as we bring some of the most important and controversial conversations of our time into a space of unity. It's important to know that as your host, this isn't about my personal opinion or bias, but rather an opportunity to listen with love, honesty, curiosity, and reveal the true universal experience us humans have amongst the differences. So if you love the show, please let us know by giving us a rating and tell us how to make this conversation easier for other people to jump into as well. And with that, let's get it.
Hello.
Katie, your work over the past 4 decades has been so instrumental in a conversation that I know is so dear to this whole community's heart. Being able to open your body, feel safe in your body, feel comfortable to be who you relate consciously and actually see relationships as a gift that supports our awakening. All of these topics and themes, and now we were just talking in our preliminary chat, conversations that people are really wanting to have, conversations that are trending. But I think it's fair to assume that maybe 30, 40 years ago, that wasn't necessarily the case. My first curiosity, if you're happy for us to dive straight into it, is can you give us a bit of like a backstory, a context? Where did this begin for you? And what led you to want to champion this conversation and pioneer this conversation?
Well, I'll go way back. My mother's first entry in my baby book, which I didn't discover till I was in my 20s, was Katie loves to pull herself up in her crib and dance. I've been moving before I could walk. I've been dancing really before I could walk. And I, very, very early on, because I'm a mover, and I didn't really know what that meant until much more recently, but when I move, I can see what's going on. And I can see energy in people's interactions. And so even as a very young child, I was able to understand the dynamics of what was going on in my family. And I got really curious about the difference between what people said and what people were doing. And I became a student, and that was really what led me to get so interested in kind of human engineering rather than, physical objects engineering. When I got into school, I realized that almost all education is from here to here. And there was no inclusion of the body at all. In fact, it was really, the body was bad. And we know that the body is bad from, the last 2,000-3,000 years. So celebrating the language of movement, celebrating the language of the body, and this incredible frontier that we all have just in our movement signature and pace and how we take up space. But then when you add another person into that dynamic, then you get just all kinds of the dynamics of relationship that I call the relationship dance are really about how we get closer to and how we get individuated. The urge to merge and the urge to individuate. And when I was in school, I was a single parent. I got pregnant when I was 19, got married, had a kid when I was barely 20 years old, got divorced at 21. So I was a single parent and a sophomore in college. But I loved to dance. And so one day my teacher said, there's this woman doing something in this other studio that I think you ought to go, because I was an English major and a dance major. And I was always the person who said, how come we have to do all of these strange movements? Why can't we move the way we feel, from the inside? And so they sent me to this room, and I saw a group of middle-aged women coming across the floor. It was a dance studio with the bars and the mirrors and stuff. And I saw them coming across the floor, and they were expressing no. They were dancing no, each one of these women across the floor. And it was this epiphany. And then they sat down, and the teacher said, well, whenever Jung was working with someone and they didn't really understand, he would have them really treat it as a dream. And how were they experiencing this as a dream and turning it into active imagination? And right then I said, this is it. This is my work. This is my purpose. And so, long story, but I became an apprentice to this woman who was, I became a dance movement therapist before there were any graduate schools, and I did an apprenticeship, and then I ended up being in this dance therapy studio that was attached to a clinic where I was able to go from being a college student to becoming a clinician in the early 70s in Santa Barbara. And, I really just absolutely changed my life. I created an independent major. My degree is in kinetic emotional communication, and I just went for it. I just invented this way of exploring with people their possibilities and how much more there is to express than just from here. And then when I met Gay, of course, then that's a whole other story. But we put my love of movement and his skill in breath work together, and we formed an institute. And that's basically, in 1980, we got together, and we really didn't have any intent. It just all happened. We decided that we wanted to have all parts of our lives be unified, and that we would be enjoying and co-creating together. And we decided right away that we wanted to base our relationship on complete authenticity, on complete responsibility. That is, each of us claiming when something would go on, we would each say, I wonder how I created that. And appreciation. So we started with that foundation, back in 1980. And then all of our books and all of our seminars have come out of what we discovered. And then we would share it with couples in our living room. And then we would share it with different, and here we are.
Amazing. Okay, there's so many sub-questions just to that.
Please.
For the context, because I know so many people in our community have only joined these sorts of conversations since they've gained popularity. So I'm so curious to know, back then you were 20 years old, not even, deciding, okay, I'm just going to create a completely new modality for self-expression in a time, we were chatting a little bit before we went live, that self-expression was definitely not culturally embraced.
No.
What was that process for you like going against the grain to such a strong degree? What was the response from the people around you? Were you kind of like blissfully oblivious to how radical that was? What was your journey in that?
Oh, well, I had the great good fortune of coming of age during the 60s. So I had lots of company, of people who were ready, make love, not war. I mean, there were, yeah, you bet. I still have some tie-dye from back then. I'm one of the original hippies. I mean, I was really, I made my own clothes and I knitted and sewed and all of that on top of what I found was that the joy of authentic expression, the joy of aliveness in your body, of being freed from the constrictions, particularly of, I'm afraid I'm not going to fit in. I'm afraid there's something completely unlovable about me. I'm afraid there's something wrong with me. And helping people to find out that their uniqueness and enjoying their uniqueness is so much better than anybody's disapproval, that it doesn't even, it's like a fly,
Yeah. Once you experience that 100%. So from that community of kind of the 60s and the hippie movement was rising, did you find that there was like a solace and a support from the people around you?
No, because not only was I was a single parent. Remember, I was a single parent and a sophomore in college. So what really served me was When I was little, my mother always said I was the most stubborn person she'd ever met. And that served me so well, because when I decided to do something, I was, immovable. And for a long time, and I had a lot of energy, thank goodness, because I was going to school, I was raising baby on my own. But fortunately, I think luck favors the prepared, but also I think luck favors those who really are willing to go all the way. I was really willing to let the universe express fully through me. And so what I found was all kinds of support. This was during the time of free clinics, and childcare was available at the university, and gas was only 25 cents a gallon. So I was there. It was a different time, but I found the resources that I needed to be able to continue moving in the direction of this incredible field of which is now I helped create. Do you know Naropa University in Boulder? It's an alternative university. So I helped create the somatic psychology program at Naropa. Amazing. So through all of I've looked for a way to share this information with as many people as possible.
So incredible. And thank you so much for just continually doing it. It reminds me of a quote that is so dear to my heart, which is life unfolds in proportion to your courage. And the more that you're willing to just keep showing up and surrendering to something bigger than you, the more that life will breathe you. And so amazing to hear that. I think it's a potent reminder right now that we're not defined by our circumstances. This universal law, this universal truth is ever present if you're brave enough to go there and to be willing and to access it, no matter what year it is, what gender you are, what radical dream you have, the universal law. And how incredible. And then that journey led you to meet Gay. How many years into this journey did that happen? And was there already an interest in conscious relating at that point?
No. Let's see. I was actually in graduate school. I was a professor at my graduate school, and I was also getting my PhD there. So I was teaching movement therapy. And Gay came to teach a weekend on energy. And it was after, I think he published a couple of books. So this was in 1980. But the book I was most interested in was the Centering book. And it was a radical new book for bringing spirituality and different kinds of philosophical and perennial wisdom perspectives into education, rather than having education just be about learning, reading, writing, and arithmetic. This was really about educating the whole person. And so I knew when I knew he was coming, I said, "Oh, got him! I gotta be there." And I was one of the first people to sign up. But in one of our books, we described this in detail. But we had across a crowded room recognition of each other. And he was going around, and I could see that he was seeing people's energy, and I knew how to do that, but I'd never seen anybody else doing it. So I was watching him coming around, and he went, a couple of people past me, and then he came back, and we had this kind of infinite recognition of each other that it took us months to actually unpack everything that happened in that little space of time. But then at the break, I went up to ask him a question, and I never got the question out of my mouth because he said, "I'm very attracted to you." And I kind of went, and then he said, I'd like to have a cup of coffee with you, but I got to tell you, I'm only interested in relationships where, and he listed them off, where each person is completely honest, each person takes complete responsibility, and people are committed to their own creativity. And so on that basis, would you like to have a cup of coffee? And so here's what my reply. Well, first, I got to tell you what I heard. I heard, I don't care what you're doing or what you're engaged in. I want you to drop everything and come away with me to Colorado to have this adventure. And so it took me, I think, about 10 seconds because I knew this was completely disrupted my entire life. So I said, how about lunch? So I upped the ante. And then, there were some things that happened, but I moved out to Colorado that summer of 1980, and left everything. My work, my school, my friends, and moved to Colorado. And it was, that was my big leap, my first big leap. There was in Castaneda's work, which was very, very popular back then in the 70s and in the 80s. Carlos Castaneda, in one of his books, he talks about what he calls a cubic centimeter of chance, that everybody in their life has a cubic centimeter of chance, but almost nobody takes it. Almost nobody jumps. And I did.
Yes, I just connect with that so much. Just like what you let go of in those moments versus what you then awaken to and what starts to unfold by taking those leaps. And I contribute so much of my journey to those moments where 99.9% of the population allow the fear to keep them contracted.
Yes.
Which I really want to get into later in the interview is how, like, from all of what you've discovered and learned and observed and embodied in your own practice, are there ways to somatically tap into the expansion when the habit of the body has become to remain so contracted?
Absolutely. And just for listeners and viewers, if you go to Foundation for Conscious Living, we have literally dozens of videos, and that kind of go through. We have one section called Unlocking the Fear Code and accessing, what am I calling it now? Accessing a new fuel source. Yeah. So the fuel source that people get from fear is adrenaline. And the problem with adrenaline is it's a short-acting drug and it's not renewable. So it will break you down. So if you go to Foundation for Conscious Living, you'll find all kinds of things in case we don't get to everything, in our time. But that'll be a good resource for people.
And please check that out, everybody, because like the understanding of these concepts truly is transformational. And even how to shift your relationship to fear, which I'd be so interested to hear your views on as well. Because the second that I started to see fear as a leverage point, something to move towards, and that the adrenaline that was actually pumping through my body, the only real way for that to shift, like in my body, was to move into the fear and to actually do the thing. Like I jumped out of a plane for the second time the other week. And what was so fascinating, because the first time I did it, like everyone, I guess, you feel like you're going to fall to your death. You're terrified. So trained since the first time I jumped out of a plane, I guess, to really shift my relationship with fear, that I genuinely only felt excitement. And what if we could experience that across the board in all of the edges of what our ego is telling us? Don't do that. Don't do that. Yeah. What if we could lean in and how many cubic centimeter moments of chance would begin to unlock for us? Because there really are infinite levels, is what I've noticed in my journey. The more that you say yes to life, the universe, love, the more it's going to say yes to you. Like that quantum field is listening and observing you and seeing how responsive and connected you are to it. And it will continually unfold the more that you say yes.
Yeah, we have, that corresponds to some of our thinking about the three states of consciousness. We have Newtonian and Einsteinian and what we call third way. And third way is what you're describing, where you're in the right place at the right time and things open up and you're thinking of somebody and they call you and you need something and it shows up. But you can't make that happen. I think that happens through the process of aligning with what is so. And that fear, the main problem with fear is it separates us. So if I'm feeling fear physiologically, then you look like the enemy.
Yeah.
And I'm not even aware of it. And so that othering and that disconnect, I think, is the source of so much unhappiness and unconsciousness, and particularly all of the different addictions and the expressions of hate, I think, are really fear plus. They're fear with something added to that. But when we are able to befriend, what you're talking about is what I consider, I'm turning toward fear. And I'm letting myself do these simple body movements I invented called fear melters, which allow me to take fear juice and turn it into aliveness.
Yeah.
I think of fear as being like, like I'm an electrical pole, and fear are like wires that are just, and when I befriend them, then I get to hook them up to me. and I get to circulate that energy and use it by choice rather than, being either frozen or fleeing or fighting with people or fainting away. I think the big problem with fear right now is the faint, that most people are in this, just overwhelmed. And we know from animals that faint is the closest state to death, that animals will go faint when they know it's hopeless. And so I think that there are a lot of people are really on the edge, or they've tipped over into faint, and there's a passivity that happens. And so the love scoop is the response to faint. And that's gathering in love. And what that does is allow you reach out. So rather than just, fainting over, you actually start reaching, and that starts activating more parts of your physiology so that you can presence yourself and do something.
Yes. And it's a familiarity as well, right? Like the more we become familiar with that process, the less we're afraid of the fear, and we know how to actually utilize it, leverage it.
Yes.
And work with it. That's the most important factor, I think. And something that I hear so much in your work, which I love, is how do we become one with everything? How do we actually start to utilize everything and understand that it's working for us as the conscious creator and not actually against us? And just like if you're listening to this and you're at a point in your journey where you don't even yet believe that you can shift your relationship with fear. You can actually change your relationship to fear, because it's not the fear that's affecting you, it's your relationship to the fear. It's not the circumstance that's affecting you, it's your relationship to the circumstance. It's not the pain, it's your relationship to the pain. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Katie, because you're a relationship, pro. How does someone shift their relationship to these things? Where do you begin?
Yeah, great question. Well, on the website, on Foundation for Conscious Living, we have a section called Finding Your Fear Signature. So there's a whole process that you can go through, which is basically having somebody reflect to you what you do when you get scared. And so everybody gives signals that they either are in fight, flee, freeze, or faint. And you can help people to go, you freeze, but you wrap it around a little bit with fight, or you first fight, but then you flee up. And when people get, right, it's really how we're organizing ourselves. We learn how, because we have over 3,000 different movements that humans can make. But by the time they get out of school, most people have lopped a zero off and repeat 300 movements throughout life. You all know, friends who have certain habits they have a certain pace that is their signature. And when you get your fear signature, you can start interrupting that.
Yeah, right.
And when you interrupt that, you have choice over your response.
Wow, that's so fascinating. When 3,000 movements, who did this research?
It was back in Bertharat. It's a book from a long time ago where she talks about the number of movements. But if you've ever seen like Cirque du Soleil or the movies, you can see humans can make a whole bunch of different movements. And the way that we move creates the context from which we see the world. It's really our frame. And so if we keep moving in the same way, we keep seeing in the same way. And the moment you start changing that, we say that the quickest way to change your mind is to change your body.
100%.
Because it's always come this way, like change your thoughts and your body will change. And I always have been like, that's so inefficient. Then people just talk rather than.
Sorry, I love that way of understanding perception. That if you start actually moving through the world differently, of course, your perception is going to shift. And, being liberal in the body, like I know in my journey, my background was physical theater. So a big part of how I was trained.
Yes, it's very close. I mean, it
was utilizing the body and actually expressing through the body and not being trapped inside a particular pattern. And anyone that knows me would probably say I have heaps of idiosyncrasies and very expressive with my hands and my body. And it kind of blows me away that not a lot of people actually feel comfortable to express through their body, or they're scared that, they're going to look weird or they're going to look silly. And there's a rigidity, which is starts to calcify their experience of life.
Yes.
So I would love to just hear some of your wisdom on where to begin in that journey.
Yeah, that's so well. What you're describing is a very practical kind of fear that most people experience, is that I'm going to look stupid. I'm afraid I'm going to look stupid and people aren't going to like me and I'm going to die. I mean, it goes straight to, yeah, I'm going to just, and what I've found, because people think, well, I have to just change everything. This isn't working. So I just have to, I have to quit my job and I have to leave my partner and I have to go up to the mountain. And what I've really found is that what works best is making one choice and then noticing the impact of that one choice. So scientists call it pattern interrupt. And one of the videos I've made is what I call creative joint play, which is helping people to recover the movements that there are 3,000 movements that they lost. And how you do that is just whenever you find yourself repeating a movement, you change it in some way. And if you do that practice for just 10 minutes a day, you begin opening up. You become like a blossom, like you've been just this bud, afraid to get, wild, and you expand into your uniqueness. And the joy of expressing, it's really creating. See, when I'm moving authentically, I'm creating. I'm not just going through the motions. I'm creating as I move through the room, and creating is the only thing that's juicier than adrenaline, in my opinion. And so I think that's the big global shift that we need to make, is from adrenaline and fear as a fuel to creativity as a fuel. And how people can start is just one, we call it new choice, just making it. And and people will sometimes they'll snap their fingers, or with partners, I'll just say, anybody can say new choice, and then everybody has to change something about the way that they're moving. And what it really does is interrupt thought patterns, because those are all based on just moving in a very constricted way. So when you open up your movement, you literally open up your brain. And the research is also really clear. When you're just talking, you're using a part of your brain that's about the size of a quarter. But when you are moving, you're activating all of the parts of your brain. So we use movement and breathing really always you'll find it in all of our books, in all of our seminars, and all of our programs, because that's how you organize yourself, from moving and breathing. And sound comes after that. Yeah.
And I so connect to like the fear that so many people hold on to, of feeling like, what are people going to think? And I remember the first time I tell this story often in our trainings and stuff, because we integrate a lot of dance, ecstatic dance, movement. And when people have never been exposed to that fear, like the genuine fear on their face, and like, what have I signed up to?
Right.
And the judgment, that it's the projection of the self-judgment. I remember the first time a friend took me to, it was an equivalent of ecstatic dance. It was a 5 rhythms class.
Sure.
And there were like hundreds of people just completely letting themselves
just
like absolutely let go. And I was like, I've walked into a cult. Like, what have I walked into?
These people are crazy. Yeah.
Like, these people are insane. Like, this surely isn't normal or healthy. And I was so trapped inside my own fear, my own restriction, that I literally couldn't move that whole class. But there was something about, I don't like letting things like sort of get the better of me. I like being able to move into every experience fully. So there was something in me that just kept bringing me back to this particular class. And after a couple of months, like, I feel like I loosened up a little bit, but it wasn't until I took a trip to Bali and I went to an ecstatic dance in Bali, which was like, it 100x'd the 5 rhythms class that I went to in Melbourne City. And for the first time, I just let myself, because I looked around and I was like, no one actually cares.
Right.
No one actually cares. Everyone's so in their own experience. Just let yourself go. And the ecstasy that I had connection to by just allowing myself to actually be fully in my own experience, fully with my own body, and the magnetism that then created from there on, because that was a really pivotal shift in how you connect to me, relate to me, how I am with lovers, like everything across the board completely shifted. And yeah, I just want to encourage everyone to really like take on board this wisdom and yeah, like Deb's saying in the comments, the aliveness that comes with just giving yourself permission to break free. Because if you're constricted in your body, as Katie's sharing, it's going to constrict your thought patterns, your mind, your mindset, the frame that you're seeing the world through. I think that's really fascinating. And most importantly, I think how others then relate to you.
Yes.
And the permission that you're giving someone in your presence. And I'd love to start going there, because we got to the point in your journey where you had just met gay, you radically changed your life, you started to understand the power of relating. What kind of happened next, and what were the pillars that you started to develop in your work around relating?
Well, first of all, I just want to share with you the poem that I saw inside the door of the graduate school that I decided to go to, the Institute for Transpersonal Psychology. So I went in there, I was kind of looking over, and they wanted me to teach there. And so I saw this right inside the door. There are fools who dance and fools who watch the dance. If I must be a fool, I'd rather be a dancing fool.
Yes.
And so I said, that's my place. That's where I'm going. So when Gay and I met, we immediately wanted to start exploring the possibilities of relating. And we just dove in. We actually started working. Our first summer we were together, we worked with a group on an army that was on an army base, because I moved to Colorado Springs and it's surrounded by military. And so we had a group of people from the army who came and worked with us, and we did breathing and moving with them. So we just jumped right in.
Did they love it? Did they embrace it?
Yes, they did. They had the initial, there's always, for most people, I'm going to look stupid. People are going to judge me.
It's just not my thing. It's just not my thing.
No, thanks so much. No, I know I'm going to go have a sandwich and read a book.
That's my favorite one. It's not my thing. Moving's just not my thing.
No, it's not my thing. And so I'll ask people, well, that's interesting. How do you get from place to place? So what I'm really interested in is that our movement and our breathing really forms the context through which we observe the world. And what we started noticing right away was what I call the relationship dance, is that we're either getting closer or we're getting further away. That's it. That's the relationship dance. It would make it much more complicated with all kinds of rules and, rituals. But what we really started to notice is if I'm authentic, I'm going to notice my own rhythm of wanting to get close and wanting to get separate, because a healthy relationship has to have solo time as well as union time. And that's pretty much erased in a lot of modern life. That love is considered to be, you're glued to the other person. And so if you want space, there's either something wrong with you or wrong with the other person, or just wrong with relationship in general. And so that's a lot of where we start, is with, are people aware? And usually they're not. And so the issues that come up in relationship often have to do with, am I listening to myself, and am I expressing what's really going on for me? So it really all comes down to, am I being real? Am I willing to be real with you? Am I willing to let your realness impact me and change me? And if I do, and if I'm grounded in these principles that you can read in all of our different books, what happens is that relationship becomes this incredible journey of discovery. And we find that really it just keeps getting better. That I think that the big obstacle for people in relationship is the addiction to being right. Humans are addicted to being right. And I've seen people actually choose to die rather than to let go of being right. I mean, it's so strong because you get such a jolt of adrenaline from it. You really do think that you are right. And that's the big obstacle to really being able to enjoy the flow of relating and the space that grows between you. So like now, after it took us a couple of years to let go of blame and criticism. That's the big relationship killer. And we recommend that you make a commitment to ending it. Don't lessen it, just cold turkey. and just handle it. That, yeah. And then when when you conceal or you blame, then recommit. Don't beat up on yourself, simply recommit, because beating up on yourself does not advance your evolution. No, it just makes things harder.
I love this. A couple of the things that I write in Love Out Loud is the opposite of blame is need.
Is which
you start to understand the opposite of blame is need.
Okay, you're technically, I'll catch it though. Yeah, continue.
I'll just say it again in case it glitched out for other people. We write that the opposite of blame is need. So when you make a blame statement, like you never do the dishes, what you're really communicating is, I need you to support me around the house. But what I've noticed in my work is so many people are so afraid of the vulnerability that comes with actually leading with the need. You're leaving yourself open for rejection. So the blame is like a way to protect yourself. Like you didn't do the,
Yeah. It's preemptive.
Exactly. And it puts on the other person to move closer to you, rather than you being vulnerable and actually leaning in and taking responsibility for that need. So where does someone begin? And I know in my own experience, from my own lived journey, the more liberal I've become in the body and the more comfortable I've been in the body, actually the easier it is for me to be vulnerable. The easier it is for me to lean into others, to let go as well, to let go of the need to be right, to not really be consumed by that pride anymore. So what are the links from all of your research and work? Why is it that when you're more liberal in the body, it's easier to be vulnerable? You can communicate your needs more. You're more embodied in general in relationships, and that dance becomes easier and easier.
Yes, I would say that what you're describing is being at home in yourself. And another way of saying that is presence. And I use presence as a verb. You are presencing yourself. You're giving your attention to yourself. And one of the things I am really clear on these days is that attention is as important as food and water. Humans must have attention. That is our basic need. We need that lifelong. And most people are very stingy in giving and receiving. A lot of people really won't let people give them attention and deflect it and, have all of those different habits. So actually getting willing to receive another's attention and being willing to give your attention as a gift to another is one of the most generous things that we can do as humans. And if I combine that with letting my whole body presence, I'm turning toward, I'd say the starting point is turning toward myself and giving myself my full attention, and then turning toward another or toward the world, and then alternating that attention. It's what I call loop of awareness, is the basic skill that circulates consciousness and gives you this engine of aliveness that you can keep growing throughout your life. And it starts with just this simply shifting your attention. Because most of the time we're either like your belly button, you're either an innie or an outie. And most people, like I was an outie. I was so fascinated by gay and just so, that I wouldn't give attention to me. And, but then there are a lot of people, like my dad was the world's greatest introvert, and he would give attention to himself, but giving attention out was very, very difficult for him. So getting that movement, that flow of attention going is really, really paramount, because then you get to ride on these currents that are always moving in you, the currents of your breath, of different memories that arise, of different feelings, of something that you want. And what I wanted to add to your need comment, because I thought I heard need, but I thought, no, she can't possibly be saying that, because what we need is often associated with something that didn't happen in the past. So if you need something, you're unlikely to ever be able to get it from somebody in your present, because it happened back then. And what you can do is love yourself and, unwind the, where you got injured and where where there's a hole in your being able to receive and all of that. But we really focus on, how do you know what you want?
Yeah.
Tuning into wanting, because people have as many stereotypes around that. You're like, it's not good to want anything, just whatever is, I'm just going with the flow here. And if there's enough for everybody, I'll have some, but don't bother. so not letting yourself actually want and, taking up the space to say, I want something. That was one of the reasons that I immediately was attracted to Gay, because I could tell he knew he wanted, and he wanted me. I was so exciting. But, those, what I call his high beams, he turned those toward me and it was like, whoa. The force of an embodied conscious person, and when we all join together and we're actually embodied and enjoying the flow of consciousness and being able to direct that, that's a force. And it's a force that's different than fear-based and adrenaline-based. It's a force of inclusion, of weaving, of using the collective energy to change the context. The context now is who's wrong and who's right and who gets to win and somebody has to lose. And it's not much fun for anybody. And I think that the new model, the model that I've been creating, is presence, connect, play. Repeat, presence, connect, play. And that's the model that I'm sharing in the world currently.
And thank you for doing so. I think all Love Out Louders are just like giving like cheers behind their phones or computers, because it really does get to be that. And it's not too good to be true. It's a frame of reality that all of us have access to, and arguably much more natural to us to give our presence, and then to be explorative and curious and playful within that presence. But you mentioned before that your tendency with Gay was to be outwardly focused, like in awe of him, and he had this presence, this laser-like focus, which was directed towards you. Was there a period of time with you guys that it took to kind of synergize to bring that relationship into harmony? And if so, it's a leading question, right? Because I want to hear it from your personal experiences. What were some of the, the practices that you integrated to bring that relationship to a place where it was a beautiful dance rather than like so intense and struggling to stabilize?
Well, first of all, one of the things that we learned that I think is really a law of relationship, that two people together generate more energy than either has on their own. So even if you're just meeting somebody at a party, you get more energy together than you have on your own. And what you do with that increased energy determines how the relationship is going to go. And so that's where we came up with the whole idea of the upper limit problem, is that people have a ceiling for how much enjoyment, aliveness, connection they can handle. And it's really a physiological problem. It's not a personal problem. It's an evolutionary problem, because we've come from thousands of years of people who were good fighters and could perceive the threat more quickly. So all the flower children from back then, they're not your ancestors. Your ancestors could see the threat, could see the danger, and could be on alert instantly. And so we're just now moving into an era where we can expand and then integrate, rather than expanding and then messing up, expanding and then criticizing, or expanding and then breaking an agreement. And so there was one particular time that I think was really pivotal, because Gay and I started working together and we started showing up together in public. And what I would notice was that Gay he's very big and has a big energy. And he'd be talking and he'd be doing this, and I'd be standing next to him and I'd literally have to move so I didn't get hit. And so I remember at a break one time saying to him, well, I have something to share too. Could you just make some space for me? And he said, no. He said, if you have something to say, show up and say it. So it was this invitation for me to kind of come out of a kind of a devoted persona and really show up in my own power. Mm-hmm. And I loved so much that he didn't just coddle me. He treated me as an equal and said, if you're here too, you show up. And so it really redefined responsibility for me, that it's actually the ability to respond.
Yes.
And so I started responding and inventing and adding in. And we had, of course, very different styles. I'm a feeler. He's a thinker. And so we went through trying to change each other and competitive stuff. And also this was also the time where I realized that he was exactly as older than me as my older brother. And my older brother was always called number one. And so I was always number two. And so I developed, in our country, we have a car company that's called Avis, and their tagline is, we're number two, we try harder. And so I developed what I called an Avis persona, because I was number two and I always tried harder. So we had all kinds of, different kinds of our experiences and wounds that we'd gotten earlier in life and things that we had learned. But what really made the difference is that we kept recommitting. We committed, and our basic commitments are in all of our books, particularly Conscious Loving and The Conscious Heart. And then when we would run into any kind of a difficulty, we would recommit. And eventually there were some commitments, like for me, the commitment to revealing rather than concealing. I recommitted to that hundreds of times. I mean, hundreds. And then one day I realized I had embodied that commitment and I no longer had to think about it.
Yeah.
But be prepared to recommit.
I feel like this is a really big one for people in relationships, not being able to bring full transparency and full honesty to the table. And I know I've really had to walk that journey in my own life, and the contemplations of where that behavioral pattern came from. Just fundamentally, if you want to strip it all the way back, was I couldn't love me in my wholeness. So if I was to show my wholeness, the good and the bad and the dark and the judge and the judging and all the rest of it, then how could someone else possibly love me? But one of the most pivotal realizations in that was, I'm wanting to be loved for all of me, but I'm not actually showing all of it. So I want an opportunity to show up and to love me in that. And that was massively transformative in my journey. Is this something that you've seen with a lot of couples that you've worked with, the fear of full disclosure?
I'd say it's probably one of the biggest fears, because, see, most people, we say that most people arrive in essence. That is, you're connected with yourself and you're connected to sense of the universe bigger than you, and that's why babies are so cute, but that at some point your essence becomes inconvenient for your caretakers. So your being isn't enough anymore. And so people develop what we call doings or roles or personas. And we can develop those very, very early on. And so one of mine, I became super responsible and developed a sort of by myself, I think probably as early as I could walk. And, basically raised myself. And so we each learn that who I am there's something kind of wrong with it, and I have to shape myself in order to get attention. And so having the opportunity to have somebody see you and you can be completely yourself in the presence of somebody else, that is, I think it's the most magical experience that humans can have. And it's possible for everybody. So now in my relationship with Gay, we have, I feel like he's completely in me and I'm completely in him, and we are also completely separate. And we very regularly, we have the same thoughts at the same time. Not that they're repeated thoughts. They're not something old, but emergence happens kind of simultaneously now. And there's lots of play and tossing and discovery and laughing. And people can always know where we are because that's where the laughter is coming from.
So beautiful together, but also individual and separate, and balancing one of the things that we touched on earlier, the need for individuality and the need for mystery in that as well is something that I notice so much in how people relate. We need mystery, but we also need security and we need stability.
Well, I think that mystery comes from going into the unknown and being willing to go into the unknown over and over again, because life, the next moment is a mystery. It's not as if you need to, people confuse that with concealing. I have to conceal in order to keep the mystery. And that's not mystery, that's distance. But if you're willing to let go of being right and to get curious about what's possible, then you can keep moving into more and more discovery, more and more of becoming who you are. Like both Gay and I, if you saw pictures of us from 10 years ago, you'd have difficulty recognizing us. We look so much different now. Like I was talking to a friend of mine the other day and he was like, I hadn't seen him in years. And he said, what have you been doing? Well, I said, recreating myself. I'm just constantly regenerating. call it continuous renewal, that it's possible to just continuously renew yourself, especially if you break the addiction to adrenaline, which is the thing that will age you and disconnect you from others more quickly than anything else.
I think that's so potent, being able to meet yourself with new eyes in every single moment. And, who could you be if you had no past identities that were fighting for their survival in every single moment? And how many 1 cubic centimeter moments would start to arise in your reality if you weren't trying to defend or protect an identity? I think it's a really profound concept to be inspired by. I always just come back to the breath. The breath isn't concerned with dying to itself every single moment again and again. And it's the most life-giving force that we have access to. It's the greatest teacher, really. And to bring that into the way that we live, the way that we relate, the way that we show up in an intimate relationship is just so powerful. And what would be created from that space,
Absolutely. And in fact, I don't know if you know this, but Gay is, in my opinion, the world's expert on breathing.
Amazing.
Yeah. And so
I can't imagine the moments that you guys have shared in.
It's pretty sensational. We also, what we've been finding too, is that the whole realm of sensuality and sex keeps getting better and better. We could do a whole show on just that, because we're finding, particularly now in our 70s, we're having the best sex ever.
This is so inspiring. I hope everyone's just going to jump onto all of the resources that these guys are putting out there and just get amongst it. I loved what you were sharing before about the upper limit and the upper ceiling. And I've actually heard Vishen talk about this as well. When you hit an upper limit, often what's happening around you socially is the pressure to slow down, the pressure to hold back.
It's cooler. Don't be so full of yourself.
Yeah, or like don't burn out. And I think like worry is often disguised as love. We're just worried about you, and it's not.
Well, and worry is fear.
Yeah, it's fear. It's not love.
Yeah.
And to be able to identify that in people's perspectives around you. And again, that was a very transformational concept when I started to really understand, wow, we have upper limits of pleasure. We have upper limits of abundance. We have upper limits. And that's actually, the more I learned about somatic work and my nervous system, there's a capacity that my nervous system can handle right now, and I can train it to be more expansive. I can train my nervous system to become more abundant, handle more pleasure. And it really does get to a point in your journey, like every day, quite literally, I'm like, I just can't believe it can be this good. And it can, and it can get better every day. And it just consistently blows my mind, the miracle of life. And, that's what happens when you commit to this practice over a long enough period of time. Every moment really is a miracle. Even, I was telling you about the skydive before and being able to relate to fear with only excitement. But also I've noticed my relationship to difficult times, adversity, challenge, all of that has been reframed through the consistency of this practice. Now, when I see challenges or obstacles, I only see opportunity, and I don't have to force myself, into a positive reframe. It's just like, it's a default.
Yes. So what I hear you saying that I think is so valuable is the practice. So we, particularly since the 80s, we've gotten habituated to an instant gratification culture, in the West. And so the whole idea of practicing something and getting skilled at something is foreign to a lot of people. But there is tremendous benefit to having practices that nurture you and support you, that you come to every day. So just before getting on this call with you, Gay and I meditated together, and we've meditated together for 40 years. Whenever we're in the same space, we meditate together. And that's really a practice that absolutely grounds our relating and our ability to expand. And there are many practices, all of our teaching has practices that people go, oh, I love that one. Oh, that one really speaks to me. So that you've been practicing, and that's what makes the difference, because you just don't, arrive, ta-da!
Well, the liberation's in the discipline, but the discipline doesn't have to feel like a chore. It doesn't have to feel heavy. In fact, like I've noticed, the more I commit to routine and ritual in my life, the more connected I feel, the more energized I feel, because it's a space to revisit that same elation, those feelings, to embody it deeper and deeper. And I really agree that it's been lost when everything's on demand. Like even things like, my generation's equivalent would have been, we had to wait a week to watch another Simpsons episode. So that was some level, of like holding off. You had to hold off for the excitement. Yes. And then there was a build up, there's joy in that build up. But when everything is now and here,
right here. Yeah. Because it also comes, I think, with being a throwaway culture.
Yeah.
That I think the most profound question that we can ask ourselves as a culture was first questioned by Julia Butterfly Hill, who lived up in a redwood tree for a year and a half to keep it from being cut down. And her big question is, where is a way? And I think it's the most profound question that people can bring into their practice with anything, like, where is a way? What am I going to do with this when I'm finished with it? Where is a way? And I think we're having the opportunity now to really look at interrupting our whole, grab and go and then throw it away culture. And that includes people too.
There's like 1,000 episodes inside this one episode. So I really hope that we can maybe make a series, because
I would be delighted. I would be delighted. Just let me know. Yeah, I know we could. Because part of the joy for me now is being able to connect with people around the world from my own home. Mm. It's just wonderful and so intimate. And then also, I'm just going to pick this up and turn this direction. And so you can see over here in this chair is a cat. She's right below the pillow, which has Einstein on it, is one of our cats who loves to be in the same room with me because she's listening to my voice. And so being able to be at home and being able to share that with others and the kind of intimacy that we can create, even though we're not physically located together, that has made me, I'm not a real advocate of hope, but it's given me a sense of possibilities for our future.
Mm. Yeah, amen. Well, technology is a frequency transmitter. When you start to think about technology in that way, you realize like how much technology needs to be leveraged for this movement and this force of good. It's just about the frequency that we're emitting.
Yeah.
And, is that in fear and not enoughness and marketing an absence of wholeness, or is it the promotion of all of the things that we're talking about? So yeah, that really excites me. But just to close that point around instant gratification, what really comes to mind is just the importance of the sacredness of our experiences and having a juxtaposition between what's mundane, what is an everyday thing, and what's actually sacred, and how to create that sacredness in relationship, how to create that sacredness with yourself through ritual, practice, routine. I really hope people take that on board, because if we want to transition this world into love and compassion as a baseline, or into the 5D is a term that our viewers probably relate to, out of duality and into unity, then we need to be able to start to be present enough with each other and actually treat the person in front of us with the sacredness that they deserve, in order to then connect and come together and unify, rather than constantly being in a search. Same with things like happiness, joy, pleasure. If you're on a search for it, then you're never really arriving. And
right. You're always going to be looking over a person's shoulder instead of actually presencing, connecting, and playing.
That's
right. So I've been practicing this everywhere I go in the world, and when I was able to travel, I've traveled over 1,500,000 air miles teaching our work. And as I have just been, okay, this interaction is the only one I'm ever going to have with you. What is it that's wanting to happen, and how can I be fully available to that? And then when I'm complete with that, then I move on to the next presence, connect, play. And it's turning out to be a really satisfying, fulfilling, but also I think generational way of creating new structures rather than fighting the old one.
Yes. The simplicity, even the context of relating that you were talking about before, you're either choosing to be more intimate, you're choosing to be closer, or you're choosing to be further away. Love Out Loud has a similar binary frame, which is you're either saying yes to the moment, you're available to this moment, you're choosing love, or you're saying no, you're contracting, you're closing, you're in fear, you're in separation.
You're in fear, in separation. Yeah, I think that's absolutely, I mean, Bruce Lipton says the same thing in a different way, you know, that your 50 trillion cells are either growing or protecting, but they can't do both.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's just the moment of shifting. The way that you shift from fear to love is through presence. And so if we have in future, we could dive more deeply into that, but also all of our books and also the website, Foundation for Conscious Living, has lots of stuff that people could go and explore.
Yeah, I know everyone's going to be going to do that because there's just been so much value that you've brought to this conversation. We're so grateful, Katie, and respectful of your time as well. I think I promised your assistant 45 minutes, so I've gone love maybe you to leave on maybe like Katie's top 3 kind of simple hacks to lean into more presence, into more love, and to move closer to those around us that people can go away and action.
Sure. Okay, so friendly pattern interrupts. When you're repeating yourself, do something different. Just very simple, faster, slower. Turn fully toward your experience. Turn your whole self toward your experience, whether it's connecting or listening to yourself. And Gay would say, love yourself as much as you can from wherever you are. And how I experience that is that I give myself, it's as if I'm sitting next to a close friend on a porch swing. I be with myself as intimately as I can. And from that, then I get more juice to, continue experimenting and exploring.
So beautiful. What beautiful, actionable, practical, simple ways to become more present and to relate more intimately. Just, yeah, so great and so aligned in what I feel and believe. So thank you.
Well, I'm delighted because I think that the future is resonance and alignment. So it's a great pleasure to meet you and interact with you because I'm also very interested in making sure that what we've discovered doesn't get lost in this crazy time.
Yeah, amen. And I want to honor you as well, as someone that is doing this work now and looking at the landscape I get to do this work in, and just really understanding that I stand on the shoulders of giants. And just, thank you for being that warrior, 19 single mom, championing this message. And just please know that it definitely isn't going to get lost. There's more and more of us unifying with this same understanding to transform, judge, separation, duality systems that are built on powerlessness, oppression, fear. I truly know so deeply in my heart that will not be what triumphs into the future.
I agree. I think we're in the end days of that system. And but we're having kind of a messy birth right now. We're hospicing and birthing at the same time, and it's kind of messy. But I forget which artist said, the creativity is messy. So let's just let it be messy and keep choosing.
Chaos and entropy is just the process before the rebirth and the beauty. And it's definitely coming. We're hosting a summit in a few weeks, which I'd love if you had the opportunity post election. It's strategically we're doing it.
Oh, yeah. I think there's much needed post-election. Yeah, so just be in touch. I would be delighted. Yes, and I love what you're doing, and any way I can support what you all are up to, let me know.
Thank you, Katie. Yeah, it's about bringing leaders together to unify, even in their differences. I think that's it. We don't all need to agree in order to coexist and to still be with each other in that. So we will definitely be in touch about that. I just want to ask, does anyone on the live Zoom call want to just acknowledge Katie for her amazing work? I'd love the send off to be, just a deep honoring from our tribe.
Well, needless to say, Nick, Katie, such an honor and a pleasure. And thank you both for your magnificent genius and your commitment to this work. I feel like this is a manifestation of things that are purposed to be. And I personally am celebrating, can't wait for the series and the seminars and to play some more and co-create with you all. So thank you for your wisdoms and your generosity in sharing.
Yes, thank you, Deb. You're such a catalyst.
Amen. Thank you, Deb.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm so glad I got on here today. Very synchronistic to what I'm currently experiencing and being in my body and, having that reconnection. And for someone that grew up in survival mode and grew up in South Africa, I'm really shifting that within my body. And so very grateful for this talk today. And yeah, love what you're doing and loved your story. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure.
Thanks, Nick.
Yeah, can I just say thank you so much as well. I'm synchronistic as well. I was just in bed, just about to turn the light out, and then popped up, and I was like, oh, I didn't expect this. So, yeah, thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm so glad that we were able to connect.
Your message is reaching far and wide, and we'll do whatever we can to make sure that this podcast is listened to as many times as humanly possible as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Nick. All right. I'm going now to watch the World Series. My husband is a baseball fan, and this is the first night of the World Series, which is just really American teams, but we call it the World Series. But all right. Until we meet again. Bye now.
Thank you for listening, my friend. If you enjoyed the show, please let us know by leaving a review or sharing the episode with someone you love and expanding this conversation as far and wide as possible. If you're looking for a community to have conversations with about global affairs, please jump in our Telegram group or join our free think tanks. Thanks for being a part of the shift towards a love-based civilization. We'll see you in the Telegram group or in the next episode.